and welcome to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We are glad that you are joining us today for today's episode on the 1989 film Batman, of which Caleb and I are big fans. And speaking of Caleb, my good friend Caleb is here. As always, how are you doing today, Caleb?
I'm fantastic. Can't wait to talk about this, Mark. How are you?
Me too. I'm doing great. And then I just realized I do think of you as my good friend, except when we're doing the show, because you always try to steal my make me look stupid question for our last segment. For those who are regular listeners will know about that segment. It does bring you joy. I have a challenge for you today. I only have one question prepared for make me look. I think that it's such an unusual question that there's no way you're going to steal it. So that just up front, that's where we are. All right.
Okay.
Before we move on, though, let's do a little housekeeping. We want to remind everybody that we are sponsored by progressivechristianity.org. It is truly a fantastic place for all of your progressive Christian needs and resources. You can find liturgies there, great books that you might be interested in, essays on various topics. We really encourage you to go there. Also, don't forget to follow Moonshine Jesus Show on Facebook and go ahead and sign up for us on any of the places you get your podcast. And I guess, even though this movie is from 1989, I guess I need to say spoiler alert. I mean, can you really
spoil? It be fair game right now, right?
Really,
35 years. 35
we are celebrating the 35th anniversary of this movie. Yeah. It's weird, but yeah, if you haven't seen it, we will be talking a lot about it and spoiling parts of it. So, but more importantly, before we move on to our first segment, we need drinks to enjoy this with. So I'm curious, what did you decide to go with?
Well, I was inspired by Jack Nicholson's antics as the Joker, and there is the scene where he takes over the news station. He's got a commercial for Smilex, and whenever he's showing his Smilex, we get to see it as kind of this in this green kind of bottle, and so I've got a Smilex inspired cocktail. It is vodka with green Jolly Ranchers. So I've got kind of that. I thought that seemed very flavorful, like the Joker. So that seemed appropriate to me. Smilex. How about you? What are you drinking?
Well, one of my favorite things about this movie is the casting of Michael Keaton as Batman. But more importantly, Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne. I think he plays Bruce in a way that no one else plays him, and I think it's kind of the most brilliant take on it. So I'm having what is called a Bruce Wayne, and it is nothing more than iced coffee, a little bit of syrup, of maple syrup, and some bourbon in it. And it's called a Michael.
That sounds good.
I was going to say it's called a Michael Keaton. It's called a Bruce Wayne.
A Bruce Wayne. He is Bruce Wayne.
He is. Right? I agree. All right. Well, cheers. We'll catch you all after this drop. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Won't you shine?
Hello, and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show, where today we're talking about 1989 Batman, and we are celebrating its 35th anniversary. And Mark, as we geek out for a little bit, I just don't feel right about starting this segment without asking you if you've ever danced with the devil by the pale moonlight. Have you ever?
It's such a great line. You know, it's such a great line. And I remember the first time hearing it and just going, oh, and it just feels so ominous, right? And on rewatching, I realized it's actually like a line that shows that I love this movie. I love this movie. it's a line that shows how badly written this movie is.
It,
You know, the whole
yeah.
thing with like the guy that killed his parents
Yeah.
said that, and now
Mhm.
the Joker says it, so he knows
Yeah.
it's the same guy. But the Joker says it. He says, "I like to say this to all of my victims."
Oh, yeah.
But we just saw like 5 victims before that.
Where he doesn't say it. You know, it is poorly written. I in many parts. I think especially as you get towards the end of the movie, it was clear that they were up against production deadlines,
Right.
and you know they people would come and ask him about how the movie was going to end, and they say, "Well, we can't tell you that." But it was also because they didn't know yet, and it was very in a very real way being
Yeah.
written as it was being finished, and uh, and you know sloppy writing in some places too. I think another
Yeah.
example of a Joker line that's pretty sloppy is like whenever Batman says you killed my parents, and he says I was a kid when I killed your parents. Well, how does he know who his parents even are? You know,
Right.
you're right. I think sloppily written in a lot of places, but also a fantastic
Oh,
movie.
so
And
good.
I told you last week, Mark, that I know this isn't the best movie ever made. I know it's not the best Batman movie ever made, but it is my favorite movie. I
I
love this
get it.
movie. It came out in 1989. I was 4 years old. It defined my childhood, and I think became iconic for many of us. And Michael Uslan bought the rights to Batman in the late 70s, early 80s because DC didn't think it would be profitable. And he bought it for just like maybe $50,000 or
Yeah.
something like that. And he tried to get it made for a decade. And then finally Warner Brothers agreed to do it. And as you mentioned earlier, Michael Keaton is cast, and a reported in the 50,000 letters go to Warner Brothers complaining
Wow.
that Mr. Mom has been
50.
cast as Batman in the days before social media, and which is
Crazy.
kind of impressive. So,
Nuts.
like 50,000 people are like, "No, he doesn't look like Batman. We don't think he could be Batman." And then he dresses up as Batman, and he says that opening line, "I'm Batman," and everyone's like, "Oh, he's Batman," which I think, to me, to your point earlier, is the perfect casting, right? Someone who doesn't look like they could ever be Batman. He's
Yeah.
not physically intimidating. He's not a
Yep.
big guy. He seems a little off, but you don't. So
Yeah.
you know you look in his eyes, you think maybe this guy could dress up as a bat, but he doesn't look
Yeah.
like it. So would you say more about? I think I agree. I think the casting
Oh,
of Michael Keaton was brilliant. What do you think about Michael Keaton and the casting of other characters in this movie
I
more
think
generally?
Michael Keaton couldn't have been more brilliant
Yeah.
casting. And it wasn't just the casting in terms of some of the things that you're talking about and the look, like they even
Yeah.
used his natural kind of spiked eyebrow line to
Right.
make
Yeah.
it out for the, and so it all fits really well. He just seemed to get this character better than I think anyone ever has, because when he's Bruce Wayne, he plays him as this sort of aloof, odd man out who doesn't quite fit in, rather than the debonair, millionaire,
Playboy type. Yeah.
playboy type. He plays him like a person who's been through some trauma might be, but then he has this light switch, man. This, like you said, he's not a big guy. He's not a muscular guy. He's somewhat short. I think he's like 5'9" or something. For Batman, that's pretty short.
Right.
And they had to like build him up. But when he becomes Batman, he turns off all of that shy aloofness. He is so intense and serious and frightening, frankly. He is, he puts fear in you. I thought that was brilliant. And then, I mean, how in the world are you ever going to go wrong casting Jack Nicholson as anything?
Well, I mean, especially as someone who's psychotic, I think that's
a little bit on the edge and could lose it at any second. Great wicked sense. So good. But there's so many great pieces. The gentleman who plays Alfred, I don't know that we've ever had a bad Alfred in any Batman movies, but he's exceptional at it. Robert Wool as the reporter, I think, is brilliant and delivers one of my all-time favorite lines in any movie. He must have been king of the wicker people. I just thought I thought it was hysterical, and I still do. Every time I hear it, it makes me laugh. How about you? I mean, what'd you think
Billy
about
D.
the cast?
Williams?
Oh,
Billy
yeah,
D.
it's
Williams
Two-Face.
as
Yeah, Harvey Dent.
Harvey Dent that we never
Yeah.
got to quite see
Never
fully
quite get our
realized
Two-Face. Yeah.
as Two-Face. Yeah, I think is great. The other thing about all of these people is, and I think this is just kind of the brilliance of having Tim Burton direct this movie. Although I will say that I think this movie benefited from having some studio intervention and not letting Tim Burton be all Tim Burton.
All Tim Burton.
That he casts people who have unique voices as well and kind of unique personalities. They're all very interesting, like as human beings,
except for the lead character we haven't named, and maybe that's part of it. Vicky Vale.
Yeah,
who doesn't have a unique. She was very good in the role, but she didn't stand out from everybody in terms of presentation, in terms of her voice style, you know. And I'm sure Burton's a smart guy. There's a reason why he did that.
There is a reason.
Yeah.
Do you know what it is?
I have no idea.
It's because Sean Young was cast to be Vicky Vale from Blade Runner. Sean Young from Blade Runner. Yeah. And so remember when they're sitting in the kind of the small kitchen on Bruce and Vicky's date, and they're talking with Alfred, and he's talking about horseback riding and stuff. Well, that was originally supposed to be a scene, and they were rehearsing for that in the pre-production, and Sean Young fell off the horse and got injured. And so they had to cast Vicky Vale. They had to recast Vicky Vale at the last minute, and it ended up being Kim Basinger. And it ended up being, I think, okay for the cast because Sean Young made a lot of people uncomfortable. And she then went and really advocated for herself to be cast as Catwoman in the next one. And everyone kind of saw her as a little off. So she was also someone who had a very unique personality. But I think also like lyrically, and I'm curious if this is just me reading into this or if you notice this too. But there's a certain kind of a lyricalness to the movie that reminds me of kind of like a late 30s, early 40s radio drama or something. Just the way that it's scored and the way that people deliver lines is not the way that most people normally talk.
I think that was all very intentional. There's a newspaper that shows up at some point and it says that it's the 1940s. So it's set in the 40s. It's sort of film noir-ish on the edges. So it's kind of meant to feel that way, to sound that way. Yeah, I think that was all really, really intentional because, you know, Batman ultimately comes from Batman detective comics. Yeah. And so there is this sort of detective side that I think that he was aware of, even though Burton isn't a big comic book fan, oddly. You would expect him to be, but he said many times that he's not. But he was at least, I'm sure, aware of the history of Batman and played up, realized that would work really well visually for the film, particularly since at that point, the only other Batman movie that had been made was based on the television show. So it was all campy and silly. So going the direction he did visually and even the soundscape of the more film noir kind of established that we're talking about a different understanding of who Batman is. And I really love that he did that.
And Carl Grisham, I think, is another great example of the mob boss of just the way he delivers lines is almost like singing.
So good. Yeah.
Speaking of music, Prince also. So Danny Elfman did the score, and then
incredible score. It defined what Batman music is supposed to sound like. From that moment on, that's the Batman theme.
And I think even though there have been, for each of the other movies, that there have kind of been a Batman theme song, that Danny Elfman's tends to be the most iconic. And I think it was also it was also used for the animated series. And I think so for a whole generation of us, that was the theme song for Batman.
Absolutely,
and Yeah. So, but Prince also did music for this. Tell me, do you think that added or detracted to the movie? And I ask that because Tim Burton wasn't a fan of the Prince music that was in there. What do you think? I know you're a big Prince fan.
I am a massive Prince fan. I think, except in one case, it added.
Yeah.
And then there's this one case where the whole thing's just
tell me
absurd.
which. Okay, so which one did you not like?
It's the scene in the museum, the art museum. Everything about that is ridiculous.
Yeah.
The music doesn't really match
Yeah.
the insanity that's going on. The way it's filmed feels like it was done on a really makeshift sound studio. I mean, it doesn't feel like there's depth. It doesn't feel like there's lighting. It feels like they just kind of like winged the whole thing. That whole scene, it feels like it's out of place. Everything about it feels wrong to me. And I love the movie. I love the movie.
So that's one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
Is it really?
I love
it's
that
so
scene
ridiculous.
where he goes into the Guggenheim Museum, right? And blast, because to me this is like this is an iconic Joker moment, right? He is Jack Nicholson as the Joker.
I love what they're doing with the character. I'll say that.
I love that he's blasting a Prince song written about him as he's going through and destroying a museum. Okay, so and maybe it's also because as a kid, like we would pop in the VHS and we would watch that scene and like dance to it and rewind it and then do it again. So you mentioned set pieces, and I want to get to this. I want to get your impression of Gotham City. So every director has to pick a Gotham City, right? So Christopher Nolan famously filmed in Chicago instead of New York. And so, they filmed most of this at Pinewood Studios in London. Mm-hmm. And they decided to create their own Gotham City. And the inspiration was kind of like, what if New York had existed without urban planning? Yeah. And it was brutalist architecture. And the set designer said he wanted to make it look like hell had broken forth on Earth to create Gotham City. So that means there are a lot of sets. There are a lot of models. I'm curious, Mark, what do you think about that approach in this film? And do you think it holds up 35 years later?
I think it's absolutely brilliant. Does it hold up? Not quite, just because of the technology that was available then. And now we're watching it in 4K and ultra high D. And yeah, you can see things that you wouldn't be able to see now. But in general, I think it's absolutely brilliant. When you consider that it's 35 years old, it holds up great. And I was going to say it was like New York City didn't have any kind of development plan, and the criminals got to decide what the city was going to be. Like, that's what it feels like to me, which is sort of perfect for this movie, because that's kind of part of what makes Batman work, is that the government, the city, isn't actually working well. And so that's sort of what makes him an okay character here. So yeah, I love what they did. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts on it are, though.
I loved it. I love that it's a unique Gotham City. It doesn't feel like any place that exists anywhere. And, Batman author has said that, Metropolis is New York City during the day. And, Gotham City is New York City, at the bottom part of Manhattan on the coldest, darkest night of the year, or something like that,
I like it. I like that description.
And so I like that this feels like a place where all this stuff could go wrong. Yeah. And I think of that scene where the Joker is offering people $1 million to show up to his party, right? And he's hijacked the TV station that shows people in the bar. They're just chattering away. No one even cares that this maniac is on TV threatening, until he's like, he's going to give people money. And they're like, oh, okay. And so I love that this feels like a dirty, grimy, terrible place. Okay, Mark, I want to talk about this for like a million more minutes.
Of course.
We need to move on. We've got to talk about theology and politics. Yeah. So why don't we wrap this on up? take another drink, and come back and talk about the theology and politics of 1989 Batman.
Welcome back to our Theopolitico segment. So, Caleb, I think it's pretty clear with all of its, let's not even say all, no, acknowledging that it has some faults, that you and I both love this movie.
Yes.
And let's be honest, we also just love Batman. I mean, we do.
Absolutely.
We're both big Batman fans.
Yep.
So my question to you, as two people who are genuine fans, lifetime genuine fans.
Yes. Yes.
Is there a place for vigilantism in the world?
No. And I don't think so. I've preached on Batman too. And as much as I love Batman, I love to watch Batman. I love to see all of this. I love the fact that he doesn't have superpowers other than being super rich. That I think Gotham City would have been better off if instead of dressing up as a masked vigilante and beating people to a pulp, if Bruce Wayne had used his billions of dollars to invest in the infrastructure of Gotham City to help people who were in need, that Batman wouldn't be necessary. And so the comics try to deal with that some and, make him a philanthropist and stuff, but he's still a billionaire. Right? It's unethical for billionaires to exist, and it's unethical for billionaires to hoard their wealth. And let's be honest, he's spending billions of dollars on gadgets and gizmos and all kinds of stuff. And as much as it is entertaining to watch, the world doesn't need a Batman, and the world doesn't need vigilantes taking the law into their own hands.
What you just said, gadgets and gizmos, made me realize, is he and Ariel related? Because she had gadgets and gizmos aplenty.
And who's it's and what's it's galore.
Who's it's and what's galore, yeah. So listen, I'm going to take a little bit, a slight, I completely agree with what you're saying. I'm going to take a little bit of a different.
You're going to give him some credit?
A little bit, yeah. So I actually think that if the government is corrupt, like it almost always is in Batman, then my answer is, well, maybe vigilantism is okay, but only more of a non-violent vigilantism and never for the sake of vengeance. But if the government is corrupt, then sometimes some people need to stand up and take justice and try to force it into existence. So it'd be a very different looking kind of vigilantism, but I think that you can make an argument that there are extreme cases when it might be necessary. You don't have to like that it's necessary. I think that you can make that argument. Am I crazy?
Well, so are you saying that if someone says, "I am vengeance, I am the night," that maybe that person might not be the right kind of vigilante in that case? I am
definitely saying that. Yeah, I'm 100% saying that.
Well, I mean, I think you're right that certainly whenever there is a corrupt government, that we have obligations to find ways to bring justice. And it's not really, I guess, not really vigilantism, but in some ways that's what Jesus was doing, was exploiting or naming the exploitation that the Roman people were doing, and doing his own kind of spiritual vigilantism as he
doing the things that they were saying you're not, because it's a different world. So the government and the powerful folks in religion are one and the same. And so he's doing things that they're saying don't do. He's healing leopards. He's spending time with sex workers. He's, all the things they say don't do, he's doing. which is,
Yeah.
is sort of a non-violent vigilanteism in its own sort of way.
Okay, you know what? That kind of vigilanteism, I think I can get behind. Like Jesus
All right.
vigilanteism.
Yeah.
I think okay.
Yeah.
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 I can't
Oh.
wait to read all the emails I'm going to get
Ah!
for suggesting that maybe in its own weird kind of non-violent way, Jesus was doing his own practicing of it. I don't know. We'll see. All right. I want to move on, though. I want to move on. If this is going to be a little bit different, I'd like to read for you an MLK quote.
Okay.
And get your opinion on one, how is it reflected in this movie and Batman in
Okay.
general?
Yeah.
And two, how true do you think it is or isn't, and why? Okay.
Okay. Okay. I've never talked about Batman and Martin Luther King Jr., so I'm excited to do
Here's the
this.
quote. The ultimate weakness of violence is that it is a descending spiral, beginning the very thing that it seeks to destroy. Instead of diminishing evil, it multiplies it. Through violence, you may murder the liar, but you cannot murder the lie, nor establish the truth. Through violence, you murder the hater, but you do not murder the hate. In fact, violence merely increases hate. Returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. So how is that reflected in the movie, or is it? And then how true do you think that is, and why?
So first of all, I think it's true that hate leads to more hate and violence leads to more violence. I think that is pretty much always universally true. And I think that we see that all the time. That I think we see it interpersonally, that if we allow ourselves to be hateful to people, that breeds more action like that. And it creates action like that with other people. I think we see it in small scale ways like that, but I think we also see it in large scale ways like war. Like the deeper we get into war, the more the more problems that causes. And you can look to something like, say, U.S. interference in Central American countries or in the Middle East and look at all the instability in those places caused by U.S. violence. Hatred causes hatred and violence. And I think that's also true in Batman. Like, he doesn't ever find healing, ever. He continues the cycle. So in this particular movie, there's this controversial decision that was a Tim Burton decision to have the Joker murder Bruce Wayne's parents, right?
And a lot of people don't realize that isn't what canon was up to that point. That had not ever been around until he decided to do this.
Right, and the writer was famously against it. Sam Hamm. He said, "Don't look at me. I said
I didn't do that.
Don't do this." Yeah. And Tim Burton said, "No, we're going to do it. It's good storytelling." And so at the end of the film, Batman kills the Joker. Right. So if this were all about just seeking a vengeance, even for his parents being murdered, it's done. Right.
Yeah.
But Batman doesn't stop.
Right.
He continues. And, there's also this narrative that Batman doesn't kill, even like in the older movies. Like, well,
that's
people who say that haven't watched it, right? Because then, like in the next movie, he hands someone like an explosive and they blow up and stuff, right? He doesn't seem to have any problem with that. So I think that's true. I think in this universe in particular, but I also think it's true of Batman more generally, because the story we get, in the in the Batman universe, especially when we get to, like, say, the Dark Knight Returns, is the story of Batman devolving to the point that he crosses his no kill line and has to give it up because he crosses the line. So yes, I think that's all true, and I think it's certainly true in Batman as well. What do you think? What's your take on all that?
Oh yeah, no, I think that is actually one of the main things that Burton was trying to get across in this movie, but he didn't ever want to do it too in your face. He wanted you to sort of sense it, feel it, figure it out, kind of thing. Something as simple as that scene where the Joker tells Batman or Bruce Wayne, or Batman, "You made me," and then Bruce's reply is, you killed my parents, you made me first. Like you get that sense of the cyclical violence creates.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, in terms of the truth of it, that's the problem with violence. People use violence to solve an issue. And if you use violence to solve an issue, you learn that violence solves issues. But what it's really teaching us is to follow violence with violence. Ultimately, it's just throwing us into that cycle. So the trick is to figure out how to approach things without violence to solve them, because the moment that we immediately leap to violence as the solution, all we're doing is teaching ourselves, well, there's your solution. But that's not the real lesson there. The real lesson is if you keep doing it, there'll be no end to violence. So one more thing I wanted to talk about, because it's kind of an issue that is important to me. One of the issues that I have with Batman, just sort of in general, is the connection that the Joker character establishes for most folks between mental illness and crime or brutality or violence. And actually, it's true of a lot of the Batman villains. I mean, maybe even Batman a little bit. I mean, do we have any other superheroes where one of the main settings is an asylum? We got Arkham Asylum, like that. That's kind of like a big setup here in terms of that's what they do. Could you talk just a little bit about how not only Batman, but a lot of pop culture makes this connection between mental illness and violence and crime, the damage it could cause, and what we, maybe particularly the church, should be doing about it?
Yeah, I think in some respects, another kind of controversial decision here lessens that a little bit, more so than it is in regular comics, and that's that Jack Napier, before he becomes the Joker, is essentially the same character that only toned down quite a bit. And that's not typically how the Joker is portrayed in the comics. And so I think that's been a criticism of this movie, but also shows that this is not so much mental illness as it is a character flaw. This person who just is immoral. But I think it's extremely dangerous whenever we equate mental illness with violence and evil in movies, because so many people suffer from mental illness, even severe mental illness, and are just struggling to live life. It's not like mental illness automatically makes someone violent. What is it? Something like 1 in 3 people have some kind of a mental illness. It's just a part of life, and so I think it's dangerous whenever we see that anywhere. And I think you're right that's one of the problems we see in Batman, because the people who are going to the asylum time after time are the villains, and it kind of demonizes those who are trying to seek real mental health care. What do you think?
It's one of my big issues with most takes from Batman, is that it's pre-set up to villainize mental disorders. You could even make the argument that, particularly in this one, that Batman, that Bruce Wayne has mental issues that he's trying to struggle with, that causes him to be this very violent vigilante. And it's based on people's fears, which is another theme that we have in the movie, is the use of fear. Batman tries to make people fearful, and the Joker tries to make the whole community fearful so he can do the things that he wants to do. It's all based on fear rather than anything that's truly productive. And the fear of not understanding mental illness and how it really impacts people. And it does a great disservice to define it so many times over and over again as it leads a person to be to act out in an aggressive way. And we see it in the news stories all the time. And that's something that, as a society, we just simply have to work on and change. And the church does have a role in educating folks and helping folks understand that we need to show more compassion and not put these false messages based off of fear and misunderstanding out there. All right, listen,
100%
I have 5 or 6 more questions, but we need to keep moving on, because we don't want to miss out on our favorite segment, the Make Me Look Stupid segment. So let's have another drink, and I'll catch you on the other side of the drop.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We're entering our final segment, the Make Me Look Stupid segment, where we ask each other questions. Sometimes we try to make each other look stupid. Sometimes we have a curiosity that we're wondering about. Sometimes we like to try and have folks make predictions, although I don't think we're probably going to do
No,
that.
probably not.
I haven't stolen your question yet, Mark,
No,
and I know that you
I did
only
great.
have one, and I
Yeah.
don't think that this question I'm going to ask you is going to steal that question, but I'm still not going to let you go first. I'm going to take every opportunity
That's right,
I have to try and get your question.
I would expect no less of you, sir.
I know. I'm such a nice guy, you know. Okay, here's my question, Mark,
Yeah.
and it has to do with something that I was mentioning earlier about studio control.
Yes.
And so after this movie, and it was a smash hit, you know, and
It was
Warner Brothers.
At the point that it came out was the fastest movie to $100 million, and it kind of changed the way they made movies. And it is the movie that made studios focus on opening weekends. It made $40 million opening weekend in 1989. That's crazy, man.
It's hard to overstate how big of a deal this was, too. Like Batmania everywhere. Everywhere. And so
did you know the toy company that sorry, we're geeks. We're geeks. We can't. The toy company that was licensed to make all the toys that went along with this. It's a long road to map out, and I won't do it. But it was very successful. Was able to buy out other groups. Anyway, ultimately, it becomes a very important piece of the cog that creates all of the Marvel universe.
Isn't that crazy?
That's nuts, man. Yeah.
Thanks to Batman. I mean, and this engineer,
it was a big deal.
It engineered modern superhero movies, but you're right. Like a lot of the way we do modern blockbusters in general. Okay, so obviously Warner Brothers immediately greenlit a sequel, and Burton gets on the road to making Batman Returns, and that comes out in 1992, and the studio interferes like not at all in that one, and they let Tim Burton just do whatever he wants. And infamously, speaking of toy companies, the toy companies are not real happy, particularly McDonald's, because they've marketed Batman Returns as a family-friendly movie, and it is not a family-friendly movie. It is a very Tim Burton movie. So here's my question to you, Mark. With all that lead up, I want to know, what movie should Tim Burton have made as the sequel? I mean, should it have been Batman Returns, or should he have made a different Batman movie as a sequel that would have allowed this franchise to continue? Because after McDonald's was real upset, Warner Brothers brought on Joel Schumacher. They changed directions completely, and Tim Burton, Michael Keaton, all of that was out. Billy D. Williams out, all of it. So, tell me, what movie should he have made as the sequel?
This is hard for me to say, because in general, I really do not like interference from the parent company.
Yeah.
In this case, that formula worked for the first movie. I think that's what should have happened this time, or the second film. They still should have kind of guided him and said, "Oh, you're being too much Tim Burton. Like, don't do that again. No. Let's do it a little bit." I think that's what they should have been doing the whole time. I don't typically like that, but with some folks like Burton, you give him free reign, and he's going to do all kinds of wild, cool, interesting, crazy stuff that might not work. In this case, that's kind of what happened. It wasn't like the first movie, and it killed the audience's opportunity to continue enjoying the casting and the storytelling. Well, let's not say storytelling. That was really not great in the original, but the casting and the characters, we would have been able to enjoy them longer. So I think that's more of what should have happened. How about you? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've gotten now the continuation of 1989 Batman in comic book form, and Batman '89. I think we've seen some of that. I think so. I think people pretty much universally agreed that in Batman Returns, Michelle Pfeiffer was amazing, and people loved her casting. But
Right.
I think you're right. Look, feel was all very different, and even though in retrospect, people have
Mhm.
become much more favorable towards Batman Returns, I do think it was probably a misstep. It felt very much to me like it was all on a set.
It
It
did.
felt very Tim Burton-y. And even though I think that the casting was interesting too. I mean, you got Chris Walken, you got Danny DeVito, that it's gruesome and very, very much Tim Burton-y. I think it should have had a similar feel. And I think they probably should have not focused on the Penguin, who was like literally like a penguin kind of
Yeah,
man. I think probably they should have played into Billy D. Williams becoming Two
I
Face, and
really would
I
have
think
loved to
that
see
would have
that.
played much better. He's so charismatic, fan
Mhm.
favorite. That I think that could have played since they killed off the Joker. I think if they had
Yeah,
gone into Two Face, maybe even with Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman, it would have been a better
yeah.
movie than what we got.
I
Anyway,
have to agree.
that's mine.
Have to
Okay,
agree.
so I can't wait to hear your
Uh,
question, Mark. That
My
you
question is
got for
actually
me.
just more. I thought this would be fun to think about.
Okay, I'm ready.
Um, you mentioned how unusual the casting was thought
Yes.
to be when it first came out.
Yes.
If they were to remake the movie and do kind of the same kind of unusual casting, comedian as Batman and some kind of someone else that you would be unexpected as the Joker, who would you cast as the Batman and then as the Joker?
Ooh. Okay. We're gonna do the same type of thing, but
Kind of
or
broadly, but yes, let's do like maybe a comedian for Batman, and then a star who maybe you wouldn't necessarily think of as a Joker, but could be a
yeah.
Joker. Um, let's cast that way.
Okay. Let me think. We need someone who's kind of in their in their uh in their 30s.
That's what I'm thinking.
I think Donald Glover. I think he would be a great
Interesting.
Batman.
And
He
yeah, and
and first
he's a comic book guy.
he's a comic book guy. He's fun. I don't think that would be as shocking, other than the fact that he's black.
Right.
Would people people would be
Yeah.
awful about that. But
Yeah.
I think, but a comedian who I think could do a great job. I would actually
Yeah.
kind of love to see him as Batman.
Yeah.
And let's see, Joker. Who would be someone who's a little bit creepy, maybe,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
play
I
someone
think that's a
psychotic
good
as Joker.
direction to go in for sure.
um,
But could pull off the
but
over
could
the
pull off
top
the
absurdity,
over the top
creepy but also
absurdity.
absurd.
Man, I'm gonna have to think about that.
Okay.
Do you have somebody in mind?
I have
Yeah.
mine. I have mine.
Okay,
And
I
I
want to hear
honestly,
yours.
I'm going to pat myself on the back. I think this is perfect casting
Okay,
in
okay,
comparison
okay.
for Batman.
Yeah,
Bill Hader.
Bill Hader. Okay, I like that.
I think he could. I think he could pull off that
He's got
Bruce
range.
Wayne.
Yeah,
He's got a
yeah,
lot of range. He could pull
yeah,
off that uncomfortable, not sure where I
yeah,
fit in, but Bruce Wayne
yeah,
version, which I like that
yeah,
version. But he
yeah,
also, I mean, he's got that squared off chin. He can
yeah.
play. He can play dark really well. If you haven't seen
I think
Barry, you should see him play Barry.
I think he's even done like Batman impersonations on SNL.
Oh, I'm sure he has. He impersonates everybody.
Me, I'm Batman. The Bale Batman,
Yeah. And then so for the Joker, I thought, I actually loved the way that it was portrayed this time. So I was trying to think of something that would remind me of Nicholas, but also have all the traits that you and I were just thinking
Yeah,
of. And the
yeah.
person I came up with, Christian Slater.
Christian Slater.
He's
I like
almost like
that.
a young Nicholas, but he can play the over the top zaniness. He can play the creepiness. I think that we need to get someone, maybe Burton, maybe get Burton back in, and we recast and we make the movie. We actually give it a real story, and we put those two in it.
Yeah, you know what I really want to see, Mark?
Yeah.
I really want to see this. Yeah, I really want to see this continue. I want to see Burton back, and I want to see a third Michael Keaton Batman with Burton.
Yeah.
But I want some studio. I want the studio involved a little bit. Um,
We need some
and
controls.
I want to see another, or I want to see Batman Beyond. That's what I really want to see.
Yeah.
Is Batman Beyond, like, because we were supposed to
Done
get a
right.
Batman Beyond movie,
Yeah.
with Keaton as Old Man
That's right.
Bruce,
Yeah.
and I want to see that.
I would love to
That's
see
really
that,
what I
man.
want to see.
I'm
Okay, so I
so
didn't
with you.
really answer your question. Let me,
That's all
but I like your casting. That sounds great. So Mark, thanks for agreeing to talk about Batman for the 35th anniversary. I appreciate that. I love
It was
this
a
movie. I thought this was a
good
lot
call
of
on your
fun.
part. Very good
I
call on
know-
your part.
I know that you've got an idea for next week.
I do. It's a new show. A movie is coming out to the theaters. It's a prequel to something that was more of a thriller, but sort of sci-fi, A Quiet Place, which was a big hit. But they're doing the prequel of when the aliens actually invade the planet. So we're not going to get any of the characters, but John Krasinski is still writing, so we're going to get a lot of the same sensibility of the original. So I think that could be a lot of fun. It hits the theaters this weekend. I think we'll enjoy it a lot.
That sounds good. And Krasinski's so talented.
Yeah,
I can't
amazing.
wait to. And I'm new to this franchise, so I can't wait to see it. Okay, so we'll do that next week. But we've also got another event coming up.
We do.
Wild Goose.
Yeah.
Are you excited about this, Mark?
I'm so excited about that. We are going to be at the Goose on the 12th. That's a Friday. We'll be at the Goose Cast stage at noon.
At noon.
And we really hope that all you come out, the folks that are going to be at the Wild Goose. We're going to be we'll have a few giveaways. We will have some adult beverages. This year we have again we're returning with our Moonshine Jesus jugs with adult themed adult beverages, but these are even nicer than the ones before. These are like you want to keep these and set them in your office because people are going to ask you about it. They're going to be great to talk about. Well, we're going to have so much fun. So I really hope that folks will show up for that.
I hope so too, and I'm glad it's at noon. That's a great time to start drinking. You know, we've made it technically into the afternoon.
Into the afternoon.
Yeah, so grab lunch, come to the Goosecast stage, have a drink, and we're gonna be talking about The Boys.
The Boys. Season 4.
Oh, season 4. I can't wait to talk about, what happens when superheroes misbehave. The Boys is so rich, and I think it's going to be great for this year. It'll be a great
discussion. This season has so much theology and really in-your-face politics that match up, mirroring American politics. We're going to have so much to talk about.
They must have done that intentionally.
You think?
Nah, coincidence. Okay, we can't wait to see you next week, and we hope we'll see you in July at the Goosecast stage when we talk about The Boys. Until next time on the Moonshine Jesus Show.